When navigating any profession, we often look for role models and mentors, people who can show us what's possible. These role models, though, can also be found through books. Welcome to Everything Cookbooks, the podcast for writers, readers, and cooks. I'm Kate Leahy, and today, Kristin Donnelly is joining me. Hey, Kristin.
Hey, Kate.
Have you ever had writers or cooks who are role models? Like, are there people that you've always looked up to, or especially when you're starting out in the food writing world?
I remember when I first got started, I was very intrigued by Amanda Hesser because she had a column in the New York Times, but then she also had that book, Cooking for Mr. Latte, which was this personal narrative with recipes. And it just seemed like so much fun to write.
I remember. Yeah. And then anytime I've, found somebody who I'm interested in, like, how did they get to, you want to hear all about their backstory. How did they get to where they are, right?
I Googled Amanda hard because I remember finding out she was a member of like Culinary Historians of Boston or something like that. And I was actually a member and the youngest member of Culinary Historians of Washington at the time. And I was like, ooh, we are very similar. But yeah, I totally went like deep on learning how Amanda got to where she was.
I did not know about these historians, these culinary historian societies. Yeah. That's fantastic. But also, I did the same thing. I remember reading when Ruth Reichel came out with her first memoir, Tender at the Bone. I read it cover to cover. I was like, oh my gosh, here's somebody who has loved food since they were little and just has all these memories. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I need to know more. And then, of course, fortunately, she kept coming out with more books so I could learn more about how she got to where she is. So I do think these people are really important, though, even if we go separate ways, even if we choose different career paths later, having people who can show us an example of what's possible, I feel is so inspiring.
It really is. Yeah. And I did go a different direction from Amanda. And I actually have met Amanda and worked with her on a couple things. So it is amazing how it's like these people who are initially your like role model can become a colleague. Pretty special.
It is pretty special. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about a book that focuses on sort of this idea of role models and examples and realities, too. Klancy Miller, the author we're talking to today, in her book, For the Culture, Phenomenal Black Women and Femmes in Food, she has this great note in the introduction, and I just want to read it. Over the course of several years, I would try on different roles, from baker to supper club host to restaurant publicist to ghostwriter to cookbook author. I didn't have a ton of information to guide me, but it didn't have to be that way. Looking back, I wished I'd had more sisterly insights to accompany me on my path. I didn't have this when I was coming up, so I'm giving it to you now. I mean, what a generous thing to put in an introduction.
Yeah, so generous.
Yeah.
That's exactly the word I was thinking.
So we're going to talk to Klancy about how she made it, but to give you a little bit of context, it features 66 interviews highlighting Black women in food and wine. And it's not only just interviews, it's also recipes, and there's also 5 essays that highlight the matriarchs, the people who came before. Leah Chase and Edna Lewis, and it feels like a big, important undertaking. So I can't wait to just dive in and learn how she did this all, because Kristin, I know this is a lot of information to synthesize.
Yeah, just as somebody who used to edit stories like this, where you were dealing with maybe 8 people, 10 people, I know the incredible undertaking that this must have been. So I can't wait to hear more about that from Klancy.
Right. Klancy is a journalist, but she's also trained in pastry at the Cordon Bleu in Paris. In 2022, the IACP honored her with its Trailblazer Award, which is really amazing. And so she's written for national magazines and newspapers. And she's also has another cookbook called Cooking Solo, The Fun of Cooking for Yourself. So this is her second book, and she's got a lot of great things to say about it. Klancy Miller, welcome to Everything Cookbooks.
Thank you for having me.
We can't wait to delve into your book and learn about how it came to be. But first, we just kind of wanted to get the origin story for the idea to write a book called For the Culture. In the intro, you talked a little bit about how it evolved from a magazine. And we kind of wanted to know a little bit more about that. And how did the magazine itself inform the book?
So the genesis really is with the magazine, and the idea behind that and I should say the magazine's name, For the Culture, a celebration of Black women and femmes in food and wine. That was an idea that came about probably in 2017. I was asked to guest edit an all Black issue of food magazine and focusing solely on Black women. And that issue didn't come to fruition, but I really loved the idea and started talking about it with friends. And one friend was like, well, you should just do it yourself. And I thought, okay. And I, of course, couldn't figure out the money side of it. Like, how do you finance that? So I did a crowdfunder in December of 2019. It ended in February 2020, right before the pandemic. And it was a hugely successful crowdfunder. And it fortunately also got media attention. So in the summer of 2020, I was working on producing the first issue of the magazine. And the idea of it, again, getting back to the idea, was to center the voices and narratives and experience of Black women and femmes in food and wine and hospitality. And my feeling was that, you know, as a person coming up in the food world, I didn't really know of that many Black women in food and wine. B. Smith was a huge role model for me. And I knew people here and there, but I didn't know of a large number of people. And to be honest, I wasn't fully educated on the legacy of Black women and femmes in food. And so I kind of wanted to write the book for my younger self, for my 21-year-old self, and do the magazine rather for that reason, centering our stories. So fast forward to summer of 2020, George Floyd was murdered, and Black people in numerous creative fields became temporarily popular. And my publisher reached out to me. I had written a book, Cooking Solo, in 2016, and my publisher reached out to me and they said, hey, we'd like to do another book with you. The funny thing is I had submitted a book proposal to them in 2019 and they rejected it. So it was like, you had an opportunity a year ago. And I told them, you know, I'm working on this magazine. Here's what it's about. And I'd like to do a book that aligns with the magazine, because they actually approached me with a book idea that I wasn't really keen on.
Interesting.
The gist was historical and it just didn't resonate with me. So I told them what I would want to write about. And the easiest book proposal I've ever written, it was exactly one page.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
It was basically kind of Roman numerals of, you know, so it would have personal essays, 66 interviews and recipes from the interviewees, and a paragraph about what it would be. And that was it. And they bought it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so.
And so it's very different from the proposal that you had shopped a year before? Or
Oh,
no?
1000%. The
Okay.
proposal that I shopped in 2019 was for a baking book.
Okay.
Because I trained as a pastry chef. And even though I am a writer now, I still bake and I still kind of have my hands in food. So like I do recipe development and a lot of things with food. And so I was really into kind of returning to my baking roots, and that got rejected. So this book is entirely different. And if I'm honest, when they approached me in the summer of 2020, I actually didn't want to do the book that I had initially pitched to them. So it wasn't even a question of, oh, let me just dust off that proposal. I actually wanted to do something different. And I absolutely, in as much as I was working on the magazine, I was like, my head is in this space. It has to be related to the themes that I'm covering here.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think for listeners, that's a really good case of sometimes you think you know the book you really want to do. And then if you had been doing, say you signed that you would have been, oh, I've got to juggle, I've got to write this baking book. But what I really want to do is this other book that is sort of this sweeping, sort of modern day. It's a guidebook, really, for showing people who want to see other people who have been successful in the field. And so if you were trying to do both, I don't think it would be really all that, well, it wouldn't be easy for one.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And that's how I looked at it. As disappointed as I was that the book proposal in 2019 didn't get purchased, I saw it as a means of clearing the stage for something else.
Mm-hmm.
And it allowed me to start For the Culture. So in that sense, I'm really grateful for the rejection.
Yeah, which is something we don't ever really say. But so in the proposal introduction, what's so great is that you talk about this being a book that you wish your 21-year-old self had. Can you tell us just a little bit more about that? Did you know that going in when you were writing that like one-page proposal that that's the book you wanted?
Yeah, absolutely. Because here's how the magazine links to the book. A big part of my pitch for the crowdfunder for the magazine was, Toni Morrison talks about or suggests, write the book you want to read. Mm-hmm. And for me, that was how I saw For the Culture, the magazine. And so the book is the book I would have really appreciated and benefited from as a 21-year-old. I was, a new college grad and interested in food, but not really aware of the vast opportunities and roles that exist in the world of food media and hospitality. And so this is absolutely something that I thought, oh, wow, this could be useful for people in a similar position and older people who are, changing lanes or people who are just curious.
Yeah. And the structure, Kate and I were really interested in that because it's so smart. And I feel like it breaks the mold a little bit for listeners. There's 5 essays in the front about matriarchs, then all these interviews and recipes. And I'm wondering, how did you decide on that structure and who would go in? Which is
right.
Even,
the
that's
list
like a vast,
of the people, right?
Because they're all incredible.
So you both hit on like one of my goals with the book is for it to be a resource. So I felt like interviews are a really great way of getting to know a person and getting to know a person's story. So I was very clear on the fact that I wanted to have several interviews and like a robust selection of people from vast areas of food and wine and with huge breadth and depth of expertise. So the interview part was a done deal in my head. There will be many interviews. And then I thought about culinary matriarchs who are no longer physically alive, who I would have loved to have interviewed, but how about I write personal essays on them? So hence the essays on Edna Lewis, Leah Chase, Verda Mae Smart Grosvenor, B. Smith, and Lena Richard. I actually think I've been mispronouncing her name. I think it's Lena Richard.
Oh, really? I was going to ask because her story was so incredible. I mean, she had a frozen food business and a cooking show before 1950. I mean, it was just like, wait, what? That's incredible. Yeah.
In the Jim Crow South, like cookbook author, restaurateur, itinerant chef, which I kind of translate to pop-up chef for modern parlance. You know what I mean? And all of these things, extremely aspirational for today's food person. And she was doing them in the Jim Crow South, like decades and decades and decades ago. It's just phenomenal. So I wanted to share those stories because I feel like all of the people I wrote essays about serve as a North Star for many, many, many people in the food world. And I just feel like I just wanted to share the options and the stories and to not lose recipes. These are important people doing important things or important people who have done important things.
I was going to say, I love how you also bring out some of the language that we use today, like being a multi-hyphenate for Edna Lewis. I found that very inspiring, actually.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
And just to see like these like very multifaceted, very creative people who we all revere, but like using that modern term.
Right, to put it into context, to kind of say, this is pretty incredible. Like we can aspire. Like this is aspirational work.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. I really wanted to pay homage to them because I feel like they haven't gotten their due, you know? So it's also a way of giving them their flowers, as well as the people who are alive in the book. And I skipped over the recipes. So the other part is with the interviewees, I wanted to ask them to contribute recipes, A, because I feel like that's kind of a part of, or it can be a part of a person's story. And B, because I did want the book to be a cookbook, or a multifaceted cookbook.
Right. Well, I was wondering about that because I could see you writing this book and think, I don't need recipes. And I wanted to know, like, so recipes were always part of it from the beginning.
Yeah, I think if I'm being honest, I feel like it could stand on its own without recipes, but I just thought recipes would make it that much more rich of a book. And I felt like it could potentially be lost without recipes in terms of how do you categorize this book? You know what I mean? Like it's kind of a food book without food. So I was like, I have to bring food to the fore as well and, highlight some of the foods of the people who are in the book.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense, actually, thinking about that. Like, where would it sit on the shelf if not a cookbook?
Exactly.
Yeah. I feel like that can be a challenge with anthology, anything.
Totally.
Yeah. And so the recipes kind of ground it. That's really smart.
Right. When it comes to the people who are in the interviews and recipes section, how did you craft that list?
I knew that I wanted to have Black women and femmes who represent the diaspora. So I didn't want to focus solely on people based in the US. I knew I wanted to focus on people also in the Caribbean, on the continent of Africa, based in Europe. I wanted there to be a global feel, even if it's not kind of in your face. People are from all over and have really diverse backgrounds. And then I wanted there to be a generational mix. I wanted people of several generations. So age-wise, I wanted diversity. And then specifically, a lot of people I follow on Instagram, a lot of people I've read about over the years or more recently and just thought, oh, I'd love to have a conversation with this person. I also wanted to have a few people who I consider friends in the book, friends who I admire and have collaborated with. And I don't know, I just like the idea of collaborating with friends or sharing the stories of friends, although the book is not at all populated with people I've known for years and years, but there are a few people. And then I also did want a few big name people, or people who I thought might not, I don't know, be thought of as being candidates for being in the anthology. Like Aisha Curry, I think is a really incredible, multifaceted person, multi-hyphenate person. And I really admire her story. And I think it's cool that she does so many different things. And her path is very special and very different from like mine. But I still feel like she's a person who's an entrepreneur doing multiple things in food. And if I can interview her, it would be cool to share her story because it's great.
Right. Yeah. And then I'm thinking you have Rahana Becerra Martinez, who,
exactly.
I mean, she's got her cookbook deal when she was 16 years old. I mean, I think now she's might be in college. So you have this, like you talked about this age range. I mean, and then you have, Dr. Jessica B. Harris in the book as well and sharing those stories. So you have your list. Then what happens? I mean, I would sort of be like, oh, I'm daunted. I'm too exhausted to think about how do I get all these interviews? How do I?
Yeah, exactly. I was like, because I used to be a magazine editor. And so I know sometimes I would put together these stories with like 10 people and that was overwhelming. So I was like 66. That's a feat.
Yeah. Well, I am a person who is constantly making lists. So the list part was the easy part for me. And fortunately, because I'm in contact enough with many people in the book, or like I've gone to different book events, and it's good. I have had an active social life pre-pandemic because I used to go to book events all the time or, be invited to things. And so I feel like I would spend probably 3 to 5 nights a week going to a cocktail party, a book party, blah, blah, blah. And so meeting people. And so in terms of contacting people, that made it easier to say, I love your book and I would love it if I could interview you about your story, and give them the pitch. And so it actually wasn't that hard. In a few cases, I didn't know people such as Aisha Curry, but then I found out that she has her literary agent at the same agency where my literary agent is.
Smart.
So that actually ended up being really easy. Or Carla Hall, my friend Marcus Samuelson made the introduction. So anytime there was kind of a difficulty reaching somebody, I fortunately had one or two friends I could say, or I could ask, like, can you do an intro over email or text us both or something? So that wasn't hard. The hard part was scheduling interviews.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. That's what I guess that's what I was thinking mostly. Like not even just the initial outreach, but the scheduling and the doing.
Oh my gosh.
And then what do you do after you have all these amazing interviews and make sure you get the details right? I mean, it's just...
Yeah.
Were you interviewing on the phone or like by Zoom, or was it, didn't read like they were done over email, but maybe they...
A few of them were done over email. So I had my list of questions, and I should say about the questions, I'm really obsessed with the Proust questionnaire and like Vanity Fair's questionnaire at the end of every magazine. They're interviewing a celebrity. And I love that because I like seeing the answers that different people share. And so I wanted to have that for my book. So what I did was I asked different questions sometimes, but I had kind of a set list of questions, a questionnaire that I sent to people, and some people responded via email. I would say maybe 6 to 8 people, something like that, responded via email. God bless them because it made my life easier.
Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then everyone else I interviewed either by phone, over Zoom, or a few in person.
Yeah, because a lot of them do have this voice. Like you'll really hear even like the "Let me tell you something," Klancy Miller, which I just love.
Totally. And I wanted to keep that, like, I don't know, because I really enjoyed the conversation so much that I wanted to keep the flavor, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the very particular voices present.
Yeah.
I think it's really smart, too, of just having that structure from the outset. You knew that all these people you were interviewing would be in a Q&A format. So you could pick which answers you wanted to feature, but you didn't have to necessarily craft an essay for all these people and have it sort of in this third person voice and then have this, it would kind of distance you, I think, a little bit. For this feels like very much here and now, you're talking to the person. I love that you got the inspiration from, say, like Vanity Fair and those kind of, because I love a Q&A. Like I love reading a magazine Q&A.
Same.
And then it's like, you don't need to spend all that time crafting a story that would be better in a Q&A, right?
Yeah. It's funny because I thought that would make it easier.
And it didn't.
And it didn't.
Oh,
it made
tell us about it.
Well, I thought, I'll be really honest with you. When this all came together, again, summer of 2020, I think all of our brains were a little frazzled, fried, both. So there's that. And I was cognizant of that. And then I'm working on this first issue of the magazine. I also have a whole other job. Like I write for a university. So I was just thinking, how can I write the book I want to write, but also make it as simple as possible so that, frankly, it's less of a lift, less of a heavy lift for me. And in that sense, the proposal that got rejected, I was like, well, thank goodness, because it had 100 recipes.
Oh my God.
And I'd have to write those and test them. So for this, I was like, oh, a Q&A, that'll make it easy. Oh, have the interviewees contribute their recipes. That'll make it much easier. Not so. Because you have to edit all of those interviews. You have to revisit them, sit with them, really contemplate what are the juiciest parts. Mm-hmm. And then you have to edit again, Yeah. And then, of course, you have to test the recipes. It doesn't matter that I didn't write them. They still have to be tested. So it was still writing a book. Like writing a book is always going to have the heavy lift to it, no matter whether you think you've created some clever, streamlined structure.
even just getting the recipes in.
Oh my gosh.
It's so funny. Like that.
Yes.
That's where I was like, every time I got assigned a story that was like, reach out to these 8 chefs and get their recipes, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you get the recipe, and sometimes you have all these questions because you need to clarify, well, what do you mean? Is it like a large butternut squash? Did you really mean like a honey nut squash? Or I don't know.
Totally.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a lot. But I mean, fortunately, the recipes were in pretty decent shape. Like I've worked with chefs, and chef recipes can be, we all know, notoriously
messy or
difficult.
Yeah,
messy.
Right.
Or difficult. Yeah, it's so true.
Difficult, messy, or unclear or something.
Yeah.
Like there's a big gaping, like I don't know how to do that step.
Exactly. And fortunately, the recipes arrived in pretty good shape. You know what I mean? There were still question marks, but it wasn't like, I have no idea what's going on here. That never happened at all. Everything was clear enough. And then with 1 or 2 questions, easy to execute.
That's good.
That's a big relief.
Yeah. I give thanks to the people who contributed the recipes, because they really were just like, oh, okay, you're really good at this.
And when you asked for the recipes, did you know who you were going to ask, or did you kind of wait for people to volunteer, or was it an option?
It was honestly definitely optional. I knew I had to get recipes because that was part of the, what I signed up for. I didn't need recipes from every single person because I didn't promise that to my publisher. Mm-hmm. So I figured, if I can get, I think the idea was to get around 50 recipes, like somewhere between 45 and 50. And I think there are like 46 or 48 recipes in the book.
Nice.
So I basically did it based on how the interview went.
Makes sense.
And also how comfortable I felt following up with people. So for example, there was a whole long process because I don't have a rapport with Aisha Curry to schedule that interview. So just getting the interview was a lot. I was not going to ask her for a recipe. You know what I mean?
Right.
Some people who frankly I see doing a million different things, like traveling to another country, producing a TV show, doing a million pieces of content for social media. I was like, they don't have the time, to do a recipe. Everyone in the book is booked and busy. But some people I felt like, oh, maybe a recipe from your blog, or, you know what I mean? In other words, based on how the interview went and based on what I know of their bodies of work, I was like, oh, we could easily pull something from your previous cookbook, or, you know what I mean? Like I wanted to make it a light lift.
Yeah, I was going to say that lower lift. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, who I asked, because I already felt like deeply indebted to them for just taking the time to talk with me. So I just wanted to make it easy, because I know like every single person is extremely busy.
Right.
Yeah.
And with that, did you have to get permission from publishers, say, if you were going to be republishing a recipe that had appeared in another cookbook?
Yeah, there weren't that many areas of that. But yeah, my editor gave me instructions from like HarperCollins Legal, like do X. So I did what they asked me to do.
I'm just thinking of all the pieces of content that you had to just sort of manage to create this book. And I'm thinking your background as a journalist would be invaluable, because you're already used to interviewing people. You're used to, following up, like all these, but you have all these recipes that you're tracking down, all these interviews, all these pieces of content that you have to put into a cohesive body of work. But what I really was fascinated, Kristin and I were talking about this, are the questions that you decided to ask the people and the ones that you highlighted. We love that you asked people about money. Can we just talk about like what made you ask certain questions, money and mental health, and you get these really thoughtful and fascinating answers?
I'm obsessed with money, not so much with, well, I would like to have more of it, but I think I'm obsessed because I feel like there's this aspirational side to food media in particular, and maybe to the food world in general, because there's a sense of lavishness or even fanciness, for lack of a better word. But most people don't make that much money. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then you do hear of people getting a really hugely lucrative book deal. There are exceptions of people who get really big deals or people who experience these really magnificent glow ups. But then, there are a lot of people who are also struggling. So I'm always curious about, well, how much did you get for a book? Or how much did this magazine pay you? That's what I mean when I say I'm obsessed with money. Like,
Right.
What are you getting? How are you surviving? How are you able to live in New York City? I live here and I still don't know. So I just wanted to ask people, and also like, how do you negotiate? Because I'm not sure I'm the greatest negotiator. So if I'm being really honest, I kind of wanted to learn other people's tactics or secrets to success because I'm still learning. So it was kind of a question for all, but also a selfish question for me because I truly am trying to figure things out around money. And I do think there are people who are great at negotiating and great at advocating for themselves and are great at sharing that language. Like, here's what you asked for. So I wanted to ask people, how do you negotiate? Of course, I didn't get into like, how much was your latest deal?
Right.
Right.
Maybe that's off the record, maybe.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Are there nuggets that stand out now?
Osai Indolin said something really fascinating to me because I started out kind of a little bit in ghostwriting. I started out doing general freelance writing about food, but I worked on a couple of projects as a ghostwriter. And she had such empowering language about understanding the role that you play as a collaborative writer and making sure that all parties understand this role and understanding that the role will shift. Because if you are writing with a chef or several chefs, you're going to be doing more than what's on paper, what's in your contract. And so negotiating, really taking up space, like, and really understanding that you are a pivotal part of a book project and seeing that all and naming it. And so I was so incredibly impressed with her naming the different parts of being a writer in collaborative projects and understanding all of the value that you bring and making sure that that is properly represented, that you're properly compensated based on your value and understanding the multifaceted nature of that kind of project.
That's smart.
Yeah, I was just like, wow, I never felt that kind of empowerment.
Yeah, I need to revisit that because I need to, and then maybe just make a poster and put it behind my computer and remind myself to look at it because, I think undervaluing your work is so easy to do, but it's also so detrimental to staying in the industry.
Absolutely.
You love everything cookbooks, right? And we love making it for you. If you're ready to take this relationship to the next level, go to everythingcookbooks.com/support. There you'll find links to our new merch, including the coziest t-shirts and sweatshirts, and our bookstore, where we earn commission from every book you buy. You can also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. Again, go to everythingcookbooks.com/support to find all the ways to show us love. And thanks for listening. I loved how at the end of the book, you put all the questions back onto yourself.
So smart.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
I think I decided that my story is also worth telling, and that maybe there's somebody out there who is on a similar path or has similar interests. And it was an interesting exercise for me to share advice that's always in my head.
Yeah.
When you're having conversations all the time with yourself, but you don't necessarily share them with other people or just your random editorial thoughts about life or work.
Oh, 100%.
So I was like, I'm going to find a place for all those thoughts. and maybe they will be useful for somebody.
I like it too because it sort of subverts, like when you learn to be a journalist, you always are learning to take yourself out of the story, I think. And until like blogging came along, it was like, oh, you can't write in the I voice. It has to be, you have to interview the people and get their perspective. It's not you telling the story. And you kind of flip that and you're like, hey, this is my book. I'm going to put the interview at the end. That's me. So people understand like who is collecting all these voices together and making this book.
Totally. Yeah. I didn't want to be self-effacing. And I felt like my story is worth sharing too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Can we ask just how long it took? Because I'm thinking on paper, oh, it's Q&A. They're going to do my work for me. They just got to answer my questions. I just put them into these pages. Boom. We get some recipes. Easy. How long did this all take?
So I started lightly in the summer of 2020. But like I said, I had to get the first issue of the magazine out, which came out in 2021. So I would say I kind of more fully started working on the book in 2021. I think like maybe a year and a half, I would say, something along those lines, just because I did do some work on it in 2020, but not hardcore. I would say roughly a year and a half. Yeah.
To get the manuscript done?
Yeah, to get the manuscript done. And then it's so funny. It's now kind of a blur because I'm like, when did the final draft, all of the proofs and everything? Oh, actually, I remember handing my editor, she came to my apartment building and picked up proofs right.
Oh, awesome.
I feel like it was right before the holidays last year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was handing her the marked up pages. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I wanted to talk to you about just the design of the book because it is so lush and so layered. There's illustrations, there's photography, there's these like luxe surfaces, there's like these beautiful spreads, but these portraits are absolutely stunning. I mean, you had the magazine, and so you have probably this visual way of working. I wondered in your little proposalette, did you talk about what you wanted this book to look and feel like? Or was this something that came later when you met with, say, the design team at the publisher?
So George McCalman is the book's creative director, and he is brilliant. And I give all of the credit to George and to Sarah Madden, who is the illustrator. She's also a designer. She illustrated the portraits. George is the person who suggested illustration because in the beginning of the process, and George has his own firm. So he was working independently, but also collaborating with HarperCollins and Harvest. In the very beginning, I explained I really felt strongly about having photographic portraits, and George said, you know what, it's not going to work. And here's why. And I really didn't want to hear it because I was so attached, but he was like, it's a question of money. There's 66 people throughout the United States, in the Caribbean, in West Africa, in various places in Europe. It's not feasible to hire a photographer to take portraits of all these people. Honestly, it probably would cost something close to like $500,000 or I'm exaggerating, but also not.
Yeah. No, I could see that just
with the travel.
Yeah. Almost you would have to be the photographer if you were doing a book like that, and it would become a portraiture book, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah. Or I'd have to be some mega celebrity who got like the world's biggest advance, or you know what I mean? Like it would just be a lot. So he was like, illustration is the way to go. And at first I was still kind of on the fence about that, but then he started sharing the illustrators who he was thinking about for the book. And then I started to get excited because the people who he suggested were great. And Sarah Madden's work I thought was stunning. And so when she said yes, I was extremely grateful. I just think her portraits are gorgeous.
Yeah.
The work that George did to kind of give the book a visual language, just brilliant. Kelly Marshall did the photography and of the food, also beautiful and brilliant. So I'm so incredibly grateful to George McCalman for his vision. And I'm so glad I trusted him because he got it all right. Like he saw it from the very beginning. He just had this really incredible vision and greater than anything I could have ever imagined.
That's awesome.
How did it work too? Did you send the illustrator photos of everybody and then she would?
Yeah, so it was kind of like collecting recipes.
Yeah.
But instead of that, collecting photos, which was another thing of like, ha, the joke's on me. I thought this was going to be easy. But it was so incredible to see her bring people to life on the page, and everyone has a distinct personality in their portraits. I'm so grateful to Sarah, George, and Kelly.
I'm looking at this book now that I've seen it, and it is so beautiful the way it's done. I would never have thought of photography for portraits of everybody that weren't illustrated.
Yeah.
It's strange. Like I just wouldn't have thought of that. And while you're thinking about that, coming at it from, if I'm an author and I'm creating the proposal, I'm thinking photography first. That's just usually, I think, how my default. And now I'm thinking, wow, like illustration first. I mean, wow, that can really just make things pop in a way, like draw your eye in. And then it draws you into the stories of the women and femmes that you are highlighting. So it works. It really works. So
absolutely. Yeah.
The less expensive way to do a whole bunch of portraits is having people submit portraits that they already have of themselves, but then you wouldn't have this like cohesive look.
Right.
Yeah, that was an idea I had. And it was like, I'm just so grateful for George's vision on this because everyone in the book is magnificent. And I feel like they are truly honored in such a beautiful way that they deserve to be honored via these portraits and the design of the book. Applause to Sarah and George on that.
Are you able to do anything with those portraits? Do, say, the contributors, do they get a little portrait of themselves? They get the book, so.
Yeah, some have requested their portraits. And fortunately, Sarah says she is able to accommodate that. So that makes me happy.
You had such a clear vision of what you wanted to include in this book. Was there anything you were trying to avoid?
Oh, that's a really good question. No. I don't think I thought of anything I wanted to avoid. I think I wanted to celebrate everyone in the book. I wanted that to be clear that this is a celebration of phenomenal Black women and femmes in food, like truly honor the people in the book because I deeply admire them. I wanted that to come through.
And it does.
It does.
Yeah,
definitely.
I can't think of what I was trying to avoid. That's so funny.
Yeah, it might not have been conscious,
Yeah, I mean, maybe subconsciously. I put it like this. I can't on the spot right now think of what I was trying to avoid. I think it was truly a question of focusing on what do I want to highlight? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And now you're wrapping up your book tour. What is the reality of a book tour these days, especially compared to when your cookbook came out in 2016?
There's so many things to say. First of all, I'll tell you money. For cooking solo, I got $24,000 as an advance. And I ended up hiring an outside editor. Well, long story short, I wanted some outside help to do final line edits of the manuscript. So that took a large chunk of money. So that when my first book, Cooking Solo, came out, I did 2 events in New York City. I did an event at Whisk. I'm not even sure if Whisk is still in business. And I did an event at Powerhouse Books with Lucas Fulger. Our books had just come out on the same day, and we had the same publisher. And then I went to Book Larder in Seattle and did an event. And that was that.
Yeah.
And that was, New York was not expensive. Going to Seattle, that was on my dime.
Yeah.
This time I got a larger advance, and I specifically set aside money to be able to hire a PR firm. So I hired Mona Creative. I had an absolutely positive, wonderful experience with them. They shared their vision with me, and I shared my vision with them. I was like, I absolutely want to do several events in New York City. I wanted to go to LA and San Francisco and, do some other things. And I actually had a more ambitious tour. I did 5 events in New York City, the launch week, 2 events in LA, and then 2 events in San Francisco. All told, the largest chunk of the tour was about 2 weeks. And then I did some events in Philadelphia for the Cookbooks and Convos Festival, I did an event in Detroit. I just did Cherry Bombs, Cooks and Books. And I have one more event in
All right.
Boston.
That's a lot.
In December.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot. It's really exhausting, but it's also like, I'm saying that now because I feel the exhaustion, but it's very thrilling because
Absolutely.
you're finally seeing your book in the world in the hands of people, and you get to interact with these people and have conversations with them and see how they receive the book. And I had the sweetest moment in Philadelphia at Honeysuckle Provisions. They had a wonderful pop-up, Sybil and Omar, and one of the people in the book, Sarah Thompson, did an oxtail biscuit sandwich pop-up. And I popped in to sign books. And a 9-year-old got the book, and it was the first time I've seen a kid interested in food with the book. And she turned to this recipe for soup jumu, which is a famous Haitian soup. And her eyes lit up and she goes, Mom, soup jumu. And her mom says to me, we're Haitian. And I was just like, this is a full circle moment. I hope I see hundreds more people like her, but just seeing this kid light up and see herself, I was just like, this is it. Everything's worth it. Everything is great. Mission accomplished.
Right. I just got chills. That's just an amazing story. Yeah,
I love it. Did Mona help you organize all of the tour?
Oh, 1000%. I couldn't have done it without them. I have a lot of contacts, but they have many, many more. And so they really helped me to strategize. Like, and one thing was, because I, in LA, I was like, I want to go to 5 bookstores. And they were like, nope, you don't want to cannibalize your events, especially since I'm not Oprah Winfrey. You know what I mean? I don't have 50 million people following me. So we're talking kind of like intimate events, like sometimes 25 people, sometimes 50 people, sometimes 100 people. And so they really helped me to think out how best to use my time and where and when and with whom. So they absolutely organized everything. They did a great job and they helped me pare down. I really think I was thinking about like 8 cities back to back to back.
Wow.
And they were like, no, they were like, let's do 5 in New York, 2 in LA, 2 in San Francisco, and then we'll have you sprinkling things along the way. And that has been absolutely ideal.
And just like an author reality check, you are financing like all the travel for the tour, right?
Yes. I asked at 2 different points if my publisher would pay, and they wouldn't.
Well, I always wondered.
No, well, because then like some really good press started to come in. So my team at Mona Creative, they were like, ask your publisher again, because it's like, this is looking kind of nice. You might want to give me some extra money. And they were still like, no. And the terrible, well, I won't say terrible. The surprising thing is I was given this email that says, we found that book events don't actually help sales. And I was like, I'm pretty sure that's the only thing that helps sales. Unless you have 5 million followers and 10% are going to buy your book, I'm pretty sure you have to do events. Otherwise, your book is going to come out and not many people are going to know about it. So I ponied up the money.
So true.
That is the old wisdom. Like,
yeah.
But I feel like in post-pandemic world, like people are just so hungry for events and real interaction that I don't know. Like it seems like if it's the right book and the right author that has this, magnetic thing, people show up and buy books.
Well, I always thought too, it's like if you do all the work and then you say that to the publisher, look, I already set everything up. So, throw me a couple bones. Like maybe then, give you some money because the work's been done. But yeah.
Yeah, that didn't happen. So one of the people in the book who I also consider a wonderful friend is Kia Damone, and she just got a book deal. I'm very happy for her. And at various points during the book tour, especially while I was traveling more intensely, I would send her voice notes like, you need to save up $7,000 for your book tour. I'm just telling you that now. It's going to cost a lot.
So smart. But you're right. If you're not out there with your book, how are people going to know about it? This book is such an important piece, and you've been thinking about it and working on it for so long that this is a celebration time.
Yeah, exactly. And I also kind of decided it's a marathon and I just have to get through it. You know what I mean? Like this has been an intense year for me personally. And like part of me did think like, oh, it'd be so much easier to let the book be out there. But like you said, I put all this time in the book. I wanted it to have a proper welcome into the world. And I really think you just have to have tunnel vision, do what you can. By that, I mean, I did however many cities. I've seen people who I follow on Instagram do like double or triple the number of cities I did. And I wonder how they did it. But I'm not them, I'm me. And it's just like, okay, do the events, enjoy them. And then you get to hopefully relax.
Right. To wrap up here, so, I mean, it seems that, you know, For the Culture, you created a magazine. You have this beautiful book out in the world. What is next? It feels like this is the beginning of something rather than the conclusion of finishing a book. Is there anything percolating that you can talk about?
I have like some personal goals. I feel like I've put parts of my personal life on hold. Like I would like a romantic life. That's what's next. But in terms of like expanding this project, I had such a wonderful launch party that I was like, I think I want to promote parties.
Wow, I love that.
So I really do enjoy the in real life portion of book tour and in interacting with people. So something involving people in the book and in real life moments. And then I'd love to bring this book to screen, like a large screen or a little screen, or, you know, I would like to have it grow. So I'm kind of in the brainstorming phase.
Well, we can't wait to stay tuned.
Yeah.
Congratulations and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Everything Cookbooks. For more episodes and ways to support us, go to our website, everythingcookbooks.com. This show is available wherever you get your audio, and if you like what you hear, please leave us a review. It really helps. Any book mentioned on the show can be found on our affiliate page at bookshop.org. Thanks, as always, to our editor, Abby Serpatella. Until next time, keep on writing, reading, and cooking.